Hello. Today we're going to be speaking about planning as well as decision making. And this lecture is based on the Leisure Services Management text, Chapter 6. So what is planning? Planning is the process of creating a direction for one or more parts of an organization. Understanding planning is important to professionals because we need to use effective problem solving and conflict resolution skills. As professionals, we have to make ethical decisions, and we also have to provide input on strategic, master, recreation, marketing, and technology plans. So the purpose of planning has several purposes. First is to achieve the organization's vision. So planning outlines the steps to reach that vision. It also enhances efficiency and effectiveness. When you know what you're going to do, you plan for the future, you're more efficient and effective in terms of resources, and that includes time. It also allows an organization to deal with change. The textbook speaks about change within an organization, but planning is also important for dealing with external change. For example, organizations that had some sort of safety or massive safety plan during before the pandemic probably did better than others who never considered these sorts of situations. And it's also about being proactive. Solid organizations are proactive rather than being reactive. So there are 6 types of plans, and we're going to go through each of these. It's important for you to understand just in general what these plans are, what their purpose is, and what sort of things that they consider. On our course shell, you will find I have examples of all these different types of plans, except for recreation program plans. And I really encourage you'll understand the plans better if you kind of have a look. And you'll see that they're all local, a lot of them are Newfoundland and Canadian examples. So strategic plans are used for envisioning the future state of an organization. These plans usually cover a 3 to 5 year period and establish guidelines on what organizations need to do, why they need to do it, and how they will get it done. Strategic planning really guides decision making by establishing priorities for the organization. It's a really difficult process doing strategic planning, but it assists the organization in determining what is most important, what goals should be accomplished, and how to manage resources while you're getting there. And it's really important, I want to stress that all employees should be involved and stakeholders should also be consulted. This is the often like the process of strategic planning. The first thing is to always clarify the values and vision and mission of the organization. You always go back to that. So, for example, Memorial has a strategic plan, and which we follow, but the School of Human Kinetics does not have its own specific strategic plan, and we've gone through a very long process of developing one, and we're in that process right now. But it really started several years ago when we had a review. And one of the things is we didn't actually have a written vision and mission. I think we knew what it was, but it wasn't on paper. So it might have been almost 5 years ago now that Dr. Byrne and I and some others sat down and, really worked on that and had to bring it to the faculty and went back and forth till it was almost 2 years before I think it was totally approved. So we had to have that done before we could really start a strategic plan. We also need to The next is like to complete a performance analysis. So you're reflecting on the core competencies of the organization in this case. You might look at different departments and programs and, services. So, for example, for the School of Human Kinetics and Recreation, we have kind of different sections that we're looking at. We're looking at our performance in research, in teaching, in public engagement, in experiential learning, and I'm not sure if there's another one. So the third is your SWOT analysis. So, that's your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So first you always look at your strengths and weaknesses. What are your strengths in products and services? How are your programs connected to your vision? Looking at your resources, finances, communications, all those sorts of things. And then for opportunities and threats, you often are then looking at things that are more outside of the organization. So strengths and weaknesses are inside the organization, where opportunities and threats are often external. So here you might be looking at the community's demographics, trends, how the economy is doing, community assets. And another example is, in our School of Human Kinetics and Recreation, we're looking at the different frameworks that Memorial has. So, for example, we have a teaching framework, we have a public engagement framework. And so we're doing a SWOT analysis on how we're doing according to the different goals and objectives of those frameworks. And then you need to identify strategic issues and, implement the strategy. And then often you have to approve the plan and then, actually start to enact it. And sometimes the strategic plans actually have to be approved, like by a board or some administration. And lastly, the strategic plan should be monitored, reviewed, and updated. It's supposed to be reviewed annually, and basically, like all planning is supposed to be, you're supposed to be looking at the strategic plan. I will admit, I think a lot of people develop strategic plans, but then often don't develop very good strategies or implement the plan, and often do not review. So that often, step 5 and 6 are kind of probably, I would say, the weakest component of the process for a lot of organizations. And then there are master plans. Master planning is very similar to strategic planning, and actually, 20 years ago, the word strategic planning wasn't often used. It was master planning. But there is a slight difference in these different plans. Master planning is a process that is looking more at how to be cost effective to develop decisions that best serve the goals and objectives of the organization. It's used often like in urban planning, city planning, municipal planning. You have master plans that focus on planning for land, facilities, and natural resources. So it's very much of a resource-based type of planning, or, different assets that a community might have. Whereas strategic planning is really looking at the organization as a whole. And for that reason, master plans are usually cover a 10-year period. So, a city might do a master plan for that period. Now, in recreation, we often have, you'll see actually on the course shell that there is, for example, the City of St. John's master plan. If you have a look at that, a lot of that has to do with facilities. So, for example, which community centers might need updating? Do we need, a new community center or a new facility or that sort of thing? How to use different, parks and natural resources. So, an agency should have a master plan because, for one, it really allows for public input. Often recreation plans involve, you're seeking public opinion. Now, we talk about this in other courses, so I'm not going to go into it too much here, but I just want to point out that sometimes a lot of these master plans, they say they involve the public, but it's usually just sometimes it's lip service because maybe the meetings aren't done at convenient times, or hardly anyone participates. So it's important to really get, especially for public recreation, that you're getting a lot of public input. Also, master planning will help to get money. If you need to apply for a grant, or let's say even a loan at a bank for something to do with resources like getting land or getting capital assets to acquire, buy a building. The granting agency or the bank, whatever, investors are going to hope that you have a plan for this, a master plan. So it also helps then establishing capital improvement plans. This is really important in recreation. Recreation is very facility based, and if we don't have a plan for, which buildings need what, etc. Even the university, for example, has a plan for, which buildings needed priority for having improvements done. And it also helps preserve and protect historical, ecological, and environmental areas, and allows for, multi-use planning. It's very important also to community development. So there's really 4 steps to the master planning process, and you're going to see that all these steps are the same, okay, for all these different kinds of plans. So I'm not going to get into them over and over again. But you always start with like engaging your stakeholders. And first is really looking at a survey and analysis. So looking to see, what you need to review the existing conditions. Second, they develop strategies and policies. And that's usually based on, you're analyzing the needs and preferences of, let's say, a community, and then developing strategies and policies to do that. Come up with a plan. Then you adopt and implement the plan. And the diagram doesn't show this as step 5. It's always important to monitor and evaluate. Next is business plans. Business plans are really more common in the private sector. However, nonprofits may have one for like a social enterprise or a quasi-business. And you'll see I have some business plans posted on the course shell, but actually, there are some examples, but it was much harder to find ones that were sports related, but there's quite a few there. So an agency or organization will develop a business plan for basically 2 reasons. A business plan is a starting point. If you are going to create a business, you don't just like open the doors. You have to have a plan for how you're going to make that business operate and be successful. And you also need a business plan often to attract investors, stakeholders, customers, maybe, having relationship with the bank. No bank is going to give you a loan unless you have, for example, a solid business plan. So business plans have several key elements. They have an executive summary, and that's usually summarizes everything. An executive summary is a summary of what is in the document. There's a general company description, and so that describes what the business will be, like the mission, vision, goals, and objectives, or philosophy. The description of the industry. So, for example, like, are you in the fitness industry, the restaurant industry, the summer camp industry, and what the core competencies are? What makes this business good, and ownership also. For example, is it like a sole owner? Is it co-owned? It also looks at products and services plans, so describing what you're actually, offering people, programs, services, products. how your programs and services differ from other types of organizations. How will you be competitive? And also the pricing details. There's often a marketing plan. I'll discuss that in the next step. And also an operational plan. So that's how and where the business will function. And then there's an operational plan. So that's where the business will be, how it functions, the management and organization of it. So, like the organizational structure. What type of employees will there be? How will all that work? If there's like a board of directors, that sort of thing. And then obviously most important to getting investors and financing is financial statements and plan. And obviously that's also very crucial for a business to be successful. Then there's marketing plans. So marketing plans are usually a little more short term, 2 to 5 years. And obviously, big surprise, they focus on marketing. So they're very similar to the other types, but they really look at, all of the aspects of marketing within an organization. So this is often a summary, a situational analysis. So that's what are the values and vision and mission of the organization? Its history, a SWOT analysis, also the product and service analysis. It obviously involves a lot of market research, like customer analysis, the demographics, different strategies, who are the target market. And that can include things like looking at Stats Canada, like statistics, or in community accounts, looking at the local level, what are the demographics of a certain area. It could be looking in journals and research, your own kind of market research and testing. And then the marketing issues and strategies are the short and long-term goals that you're going to have. And then obviously you implement and control. So that's really like the plan of action, what the budget is going to be, and how is this marketing plan going to be evaluated. You'll see, again, some marketing plan examples on Brightspace. And also want to mention there's a shout out to Newfoundland in the textbook. The big example they use for marketing plan is that of Newfoundland and Labrador's Department of Tourism. I don't know if you're aware of this, but Newfoundland's tourism sector is viewed, as some of the best marketing in the world. Then the textbook talks about recreation program plans, and I just want to, here, I'm not going to talk about them very much. This is not to do with like a program plan like you learn in 2505, programming and evaluation, how to develop an actual one program. This is more of a holistic plan, like just looking at recreation. I'm not really sure what the difference here. So you really think of it, it's really more of like a master or strategic plan that is just focusing on recreation programs and services within a community. And finally, our technology plans. So technology plans are often a component of a strategic plan. Successful technology plans demonstrate how an investment in technology contributes to the mission, of the organization. For example, a municipal park and recreation department might have a mission to increase the health and well-being of the community by encouraging active participation. A plan that specifies then how technology might be used to achieve that mission is what would be done. How are you going to make information available through the internet? Or reducing participation barriers by streamlining registration, having online applications. This has a lot, these are technology, but it also affects how the organization is run. And if you think, I remember when I first moved to St. John's, the city recreation had no online component whatsoever. And when you wanted, if to register for anything, you had to like go down, you'd see like all the parents lined up at the city of St. John's for like camp registration and all this. Now online, it's like so streamlined and so much easier. Another example, I've been involved in kind of a technology plan. It had to do with online learning technologies. So, for example, it was called the Desire to Learn user group. So it was a committee on campus of different stakeholders. So that was like profs and students and staff, all these different people, and then figuring out how best to use Desire to Learn. Also, we were looking at, is that even the best program to use? They were having to do a new contract, and then you're seeing how this works. And if you don't have a good technology plan, you're going to have problems. For example, right now, we know that a lot of organizations are suffering because they don't have enough bandwidth for their, everyone, even people who are going into work, into buildings, aren't having meetings together. So everyone is online. So those are the different types of plans. And as I said, you kind of just need to, for the quiz, you need to just generally understand these types of plans, what they include, and kind of what their purpose is. Next, we're going to talk about problem solving and decision making. So there's some differences. They're very related terms, but decision making is choosing between two or more alternatives. It's about you need to make a decision, a choice between two or more options. Where problem solving is when you actually have an issue and you're determining the solutions. You have, where you are and where you want to be, or how you want the situation to be, and you need to figure out how that discrepancy can be minimized. So when problems arise that need to be solved, obviously a decision must be made on how to solve it. However, not all decision making deals with problems. We make decisions all the time. They don't always have to do with problems. They can be good things as well. There are two types of decisions that most managers need to do. We have programmed decisions and non-programmed. So programmed decisions are simply their routine. They're everyday decisions. And usually these, there's really not even decisions to be made because everything is usually all spelled out. It's routine tasks. We have it all displayed in our policies and procedures, or what each employee is doing, our rules. So they're easy to follow. On those types of decisions, you just refer to like your normal policies and procedures manual to figure things out. Whereas non-programmed decisions are challenging. They're usually unique. They usually require unique solutions. So, for example, COVID, social isolation, the pandemic, these are massive challenges that have had many people in schools, recreation and leisure, healthcare, etc., have had to be making non-programmed decisions right now. So these decisions fall within this continuum between like everyday programmed or unique non-programmed decisions. There's the decision-making process as presented in your textbook. And I'm going to go through an example of this in just a moment. But first you need to identify and define what the problem is, and in your case study on planning and decision making, you're being given a case. And one of the things that you have to figure out is identifying and defining the problem. So to provide a context for how to make that decision, how you're going to evaluate the different solutions that you have. So after you identify what's going on, you have to figure out objectives. You need to generate possible solutions, evaluate those solutions, and then actually do the plan. And again, if you haven't gotten this, always the last step is evaluate and monitor. So I'm going to give an example. Let's say we have a problem in a city for city golf courses. Should we be allowing sledding in the winter on the hills? This is a case that is presented in your textbook and is actually based on a journal article, I believe, probably of a real problem. So the problem here is that there's liability, and safety issues potentially, and also there could be damage to the golf course. So next we have to define the objectives for the solution. So we need to consider everyone involved in that problem. For example, in this example, we have the golf course. The golf course is a stakeholder. It's getting turf damage. But we also have the residents. They need to be safe. They need a safe place to sled. They also need to have recreation in the winter. And it shouldn't just be indoor, but should also be outdoor recreation. We then have to generate solutions. So we want to think outside the box. We want to look at other organizations and look at other solutions in other fields. And you have to consider resistance to change, always. So the different options is, like, for example, we could just ban sledding at the golf course. We could ban sledding in the whole city, like at every single park. We could have signs, and fencing and that kind of thing. Another solution would be to hire someone to monitor the golf course. After we've generated these solutions, we evaluate them, and we have to consider the pros and cons and consult stakeholders. So in the example I've just gave, this is a diagram, a table in your textbook. So here we have the different solutions that I've already mentioned, and then it's outlining the pros and cons. So if we ban sledding at the golf course, but allow it like in other parks, a pro is it does stop damage to the golf course and still keeps it a free activity for residents. But a con is that other parks are going to get damaged and there's still safety and liability issues. Another option is to post signs saying that there's dangers, activity at your own risk, all that. We could have fencing, trying to direct people. Again, still allows fencing to be free, and it's a little safer, so it protects us a bit more from lawsuits. A con, though, is that it doesn't necessarily prevent the injuries and accidents. It just makes people aware of them. We could hire someone, a golf course sledding monitor. And so in this case, that's going to be better. There's going to be less injuries, or, if there's a serious injury, there's someone right there to deal with the situation, and it's going to reduce damage. But it's not going to eliminate all injuries and accidents. It's a little more expensive, and we might have to charge some money because we need to pay for this person, and so it wouldn't be free anymore. And last, we could ban sledding from the whole city. No more sledding. So a pro is that we're not going to get sued, and we're not going to have damage, but it eliminates a free winter activity, and it's a major elimination for it's a big, a big decision for kind of probably a minor and controllable problem. And also, how are you going to monitor banning? Are you going to have sledding police or something going around to all the sleds? So this is the process. And last, you obviously would then select one of these plans based on the pros and cons, and then evaluate and monitor the solutions. Well, how do you evaluate pros and cons, though? Like, that's the part where ethics really come in. How do you decide which of those solutions is best? Well, we use ethics. And ethics are principles then of behavior encompassing goodness, fairness, and doing what is right. There are 4 ethical decision-making approaches. For the quiz, it's important for you to know the difference between these and be able to apply this. And for your case study, you're going to be presented with a scenario and a problem, and you need to select then which of these decision-making approaches you're going to use. You may decide to use more than one. So the utilitarian approach is when we make decisions that result in the greatest good for the greatest number. I kind of think of it like it's a socialist approach. So we're going to pick the decision that benefits the most people for the greater good. A moral approach is basically using specific, values, a value base, and specific morals, and making a decision just based on those, regardless of what the outcome is going to be. Universalism is when you are really looking at the whole picture. You're considering how your decision is going to affect everyone involved, and you place your shoes into all the different people's situation, looking at all the different perspectives and stakeholders. And finally is cost benefit. So looking at the costs and benefits to help you determine which is the best solution. Now, in reality, I think, for one, depending on your personality, certain people are going to use one of these approaches more, or also your training, for example. But and I do see, for example, I've had leaders, I think I've seen them use maybe one or more of these approaches. Some people tend to use the one or more than the other. But I often see myself, and in my own situation, I think that a lot of people use all these sort of approaches. I think that in decision-making within HQR, we often are looking at all these different scenarios, and that's how it's a combination of all these approaches that helps us to determine the best course of action. But that might not be true of all places. So you often need to choose which one are you going to look at, especially if the different approaches conflict. And as an example, I have found usually it's the moral versus it comes down to morals versus the other approaches. And sometimes that conflict can be hard. So then you need to really decide which one you're going to use. So I'm going to give an example now that is in the textbook, and we'll use this then I'll show you then the different decisions you can make for this scenario, depending on which of the 4 approaches you use. So here's a scenario. We have a soccer program. I may have got a couple typos there, I realize. It's a soccer program for youth, and it's got a widespread reputation for player development. Many people end up going on to college or university for scholarships from this program, and some have even played professional soccer. So it's a prestigious soccer program. And a local business person is upset because his son made the second team, but not the first team. So the first team has the top players and gets most of the exposure to the universities, whereas his son is in the second string team. I don't know how soccer works, but the son is in the AA team and he wants to be in the AAA. So, pardon me, I have in the scenario, they talked about this being part of the YMCA. But he, in this case, the father offers the organization money to make the renovations to soccer fields. And as long as if they accept this money, they just have to move the son up from the second to the first team. Now, My first reaction is that it's bribery, but but that's not really, that is my personal opinion, and I have to realize I have to think about it more holistically and think about each of these decision making. So the utilitarian approach might say, well, fine, we'll move the team up, we're going to take the money. He's a good player. It's not like he wasn't good. He made the second team, just wasn't as good for the top player. And we're going to have state-of-the-art facilities, and it's going to benefit a lot of people. The moral approach would be kind of what my reaction was, saying, no, don't accept the donation, and that it's not in good faith. The money's not given in good faith because it's sort of bribery. Not sort of. And then there's the universalism approach. So here we are going to look at how everyone else would feel. What are all the different perspectives? What if other people knew that the soccer fields were how they were funded and that someone got moved up? How, would people, is it better to have new fields or to give space on the first team to move a more talented player up? You got to be thinking. And finally is cost-benefit approach. So here we'd look at the costs and benefits, and that would be beyond dollars and cents, not just about money. So if we move this, what happens to the reputation of our program? What about the ability to buy a child away into a program goes against all the organization stands for and its mission? The benefits, though, would be like accepting the money we can then put other resources to other things. We could have more tournaments, or, maybe you could have a special scholarship for someone who can't normally afford to be in your program. So for this quiz, you need to, as I said, identify the different types of plans. What is planning, the different types, what are their purpose? Understand the process of strategic planning as well as SWOT analysis. You need to understand the difference between planning and decision making. And also you need to be able to understand, identify, and apply those 4 approaches to ethical decision making. So for example, I might give you a scenario very similar to what I just provided you about, the soccer program. And you would need to, let's say I give you different, let's say I give you 4 different decisions, and you need to tell me which of those decisions uses the moral approach or the cost-benefit approach or that sort of thing. All right, that's it for planning. And obviously this is a small introduction. You can take, there's tons of, whole courses on planning and decision making. I encourage you to have a look at the examples I've posted and other resources if you're interested in learning a little bit more about planning and decision making.